All right, good evening, everyone. And for those of you who are watching the stream later, thank you for watching it later. This is actually just a discussion I'm going to have with Randolf Richardson, who is the head of Canadian Atheists, which I believe is the largest Canadian atheist organization.
I don't know if we're the largest, but we're a national organization. There are different organizations, but none of them call themselves Canadian Atheists. In the US, there's probably better known the American Atheists. Ireland has a national organization as well. And these are all good organizations as far as I can see that are doing really great work. So I founded the Canadian Atheists because I was noticing that, first of all, we didn't have a national atheism organization here. And so I saw an opportunity with that to promote the interests of atheists and do it in a manner that is going to be amicable for everybody in society. So like we don't specifically say we want to get rid of religion. We're not saying that at all. We're just saying that we should be treated equally to people who are not atheists. And we're trying to resolve the stigma, discourage the vilification of atheists just because we don't believe in deities, because to me, that's just normal to not believe in things.
All right. Why did I say it? Let's continue. Thank you for the people who just tuned in. I imagine some people will be trickling in.
Great.
And the primary topic, there are a couple things we should probably address first. No, there will be no harmonica of disappointment during tonight's stream.
Aw. If you get enough super chats, maybe you should oblige.
Well, to do super chats right now, since I don't have enough subscribers, I need to do it through Streamlabs OBS, and Streamlabs OBS does not play nice with YouTube right now.
Oh,
but
that's bad. Your audio fades out from time to time when you're talking, just so you know. I can still hear you when the audio drops down, but it fades out to a lower volume from time to time. Now I can't hear you. Hello, everyone. Well, while the Sinister Porpoise is working on that, I still can't hear you. I'll just, I guess I'll just start by introducing myself. My name is Randolf Richardson. I am the founding president of the Canadian Atheists, and I am delighted to be on the Sinister Porpoise program today. It's, I've seen it. I can hear you now.
Good. Probably because I was picking the standout.
Okay.
Picking the cord out because it's in the wrong place.
Well, thank you for having me on your program. I'm delighted to be here.
Now that we've got the tech issues resolved, the primary point of contention, or not contention because this isn't a debate, it's like, I'm curious as to know, because American atheists tend to be aggressive, and that's probably because we're really weird about our Protestant religions, is that American atheism activism, from what I've seen, seems to be really aggressive, and I just want to know what the differences between Canadian atheism and Canadian atheist activism and American atheist activism are.
Okay, so here we're looking mostly, I think, at cultural differences. So the American atheist is definitely has a much bigger challenge than we do here in Canada. So it's understandable that the approach that they are using will be a little bit more aggressive in order to counter the problems that are presented to atheists by people who are in the American culture who don't approve of us for not believing in deities. So here in Canada, it's more of a private matter for people. It's not very often waved out in public in any kind of patriotic way. That I've noticed seems to be quite common in the US. People will wear pretty large pieces of jewelry sometimes, or they'll make a point of telling everybody that they're part of a religion. I don't don't really encounter that too much here in Canada. Being Canadian myself, grew up with people who it just wasn't a focal point of people's lives. And for the most part, it still isn't. There are some evangelical groups here in particular, and some other religious groups, though, that do push the ideas pretty strongly. And so when they start to push too far, they tend to get a lot of pushback from society anyway. But the idea of the vilification of atheists and the response of shock and surprise when a theist finds out that you don't believe in a deity, or at least not the one that they do, still persists. So we're trying to change public perception of atheism here in Canada. So our approach tends to be more focused on open dialogue and kind of a gentle and professional approach on these things. I think the American Atheists uses a professional approach as well, but with a very different focus than ours, because they're up against groups that are working pretty hard to take away people's rights. We don't get that much of it here, so we tend to focus more on the gentler things. One of the reasons, too, I think it's good timing for us to have started, is that we don't have such a large battle. But with our previous political party before the current one now, they're very right-wing religious focused, and they were trying to sort of lay the groundwork to change Canada to a Christian theocracy. So there is demand for this sort of thing. So we don't want that to happen. So, and there's a lot of people who don't want that to happen, which is why they're not in power anymore.
All right, that brings up an interesting point, because we have a lot of people in America who would love to have the United States as a Christian theocracy, except the one exception to this, oddly enough, is Utah, who wants a Mormon theocracy, which is still Christian, but technically Utah is a Mormon theocracy, but that's a different point altogether. So I'm curious, how very active is the right wing in Canada?
It's active, but it's not as publicly active as what we see in the U.S. So they tend to work a little bit more behind the scenes because of our culture. It's our nature to kind of keep these things more as private matters. And for example, in the politics, I'll see that the Conservative Party at the federal level here will say things like they're not going to reopen the issue on abortion, but if people want to raise the issue, they'll be open to discussing it, which seems to send an interesting mixed message in a way that people can read it any way they want. As a government, they have to be open to what constituents want to raise. I can't hear you.
Yeah,
there we go.
I'll mute myself.
No problem.
Which brings up another question. One of the weird things about America, especially now that we've elected the gigantic orange buffoon in the White House, who I don't want to name,
okay,
is that we don't really have...
Let's call him Voldemort.
We don't really have a left wing in America, as many people have pointed out, including Noam Chomsky. And for those of you who played World of Warcraft and pay no attention to politics, the guy's name is Noam, it's not his race. Is that the same situation in Canada?
We have 5 major political parties here. One of them is only in the province of Quebec, and the other 4 are spread throughout Canada. We have the Liberals, who are currently elected. They're right now in a minority government. Previously, just before the re-election, it was a majority government. There was the Conservative Party before that, which is on the right. So the Liberals are on the left. The NDP is kind of on the left and very, very strongly pro-union. There's the Green Party, which has started to make inroads into politics, and I suspect they're probably going to get a few more people elected, but they're nowhere. I don't think they're anywhere close yet to being considered a major party. But I think that they're well known enough that they definitely qualify. So it just depends on what your criteria is. But we've typically had more than 2 parties. So I noticed that countries that have only 2 political parties tend to get polarized pretty quickly. And from up here in Canada, the Democratic Party in the U.S. does look more left-wing, and the Republican looks more right-wing. But I'm hearing lately some people saying that the Democrats are more center rather than left. So I'm not sure where that could lead, but I think that'll be somewhat disruptive if that's the case to the polarization. I think that the U.S. could benefit greatly by having at least 3 political parties so that people end up not being able to get polarized and aligned just to one side versus the other and have this dichotomy, this bifurcated dichotomy of just 2 options.
Unfortunately, I think the closest thing we have to a viable third party right now is the Libertarian Party, which is, well, they're still right-wing, but they're less authoritarian than the Republicans, unless, of course, you're listening to people like Alex Jones, who think libertarian means to the right of the Republican Party, which is not what it means.
If Alex Jones was put up as the next president by the Republican Party, do you think they'd get elected?
I don't know at this point, because I didn't think Trump would get elected.
Oh, boy.
But our electoral college system is just a bizarre relic of outdated technology that needs to be changed.
Like I noticed that, like what I've learned from talking to different Americans throughout the last year or so on YouTube about this topic, is that each state, it seems, is in charge of looking after the federal elections and making sure that people are able to get out to vote, and each state does things a little bit differently. Here in Canada, we have a federal department for this that has the jurisdiction is every province throughout the whole and territory throughout Canada, and where so the standard is set, and they are an apolitical party, so they're organization, branch of the government that just makes sure that our Charter of Rights and Freedoms are taken care of, and making sure that everybody has access to vote by mail if they're not able to come in person to vote, and things like that. And then people can also do the early voting too if it's convenient. My wife and I sure did, and it keeps it from the last voting day being as busy that way. But yeah, we have it's called Elections Canada, our federal department for that, and that seems to work quite well each year. And they never endorse any political party. They never have. And it's just, you've got civil servants working there who are focused on what the policies and regulations are and making sure that everything is being done according to that. And it has worked quite well for us here. And I feel like the US could probably benefit greatly from something like that, because then your elections could be a lot more fair. At least that might be a good starting point.
I think they would be more fair if we did vote by mail. One of the major obstacles to vote by mail is because mostly only blue states have done it, and Republicans are afraid of it because they're afraid that it will skew left, which, of course, if it's only done in blue states, it's going to skew left or skew to the Democratic Party.
Wow. Okay. So that's what it is. Yeah, interesting. I never realized that was the angle. So there's statistics showing that most Republicans do not vote by mail then.
Well, most Republicans don't live in the blue states.
Yeah. Okay. So that's an interesting pattern. I wonder if they're committing a fallacy, the consequent with that, or if there's actually a causal relationship there.
I think it's more, I think it's more of a causation doesn't equal correlation. Correlation doesn't equal causation, which if anyone took a quantitative reasoning class or a statistic class, they'd know what the problem there is. Because I've heard there are studies that have shown vote by mail doesn't favor one party or the other. But then it occurred to me, it's like, wait a minute, aren't most of the states that vote by mail usually in the Pacific Northwest, which are blue states? Which brings up, well, it doesn't exactly lead to this topic, but I am kind of wondering about that because I've heard both Paulogia and I think Vice Trino, whose name is
I like them. Yeah.
Whose name is an anagram of Ericovid, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You learn something new every day. Okay, your channel now qualifies as educational. Congratulations.
Complain about, I believe they're both in Ontario. I'm not entirely sure about that.
Vice Rhino is definitely a skeptic and definitely pro-evolution. So Kent Hovind is on the other end of that spectrum.
Complain about some sort of conference that was going on, I guess, in some city in Ontario. I can't remember which one it was. I think Toronto was in Ontario because my geography is currently failing me.
Toronto is the capital city in Ontario, definitely. Or not capital city, but it's a major city, business center.
But do you have to fight? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was thinking Ottawa. Ottawa is where we have our government headquarters in Ontario.
Ottawa. Yeah. It was Ottawa, because that's
okay.
where Canadian Bill C-16 came out of.
Which Jordan Peterson totally misinterpreted and misunderstood. I wonder if he even read it and maybe just took somebody else's misinterpretation and ran with it. And he was working at the University of Toronto, I believe, at that time. And he could have very easily just knocked on the door of one of his law professor colleagues and asked them, am I understanding this correctly, before talking about it publicly? And no, he just, because I read Bill 16 and it didn't have anything in there that he said it did. So, but most people didn't read it. So you're muted right now. There we go.
I'm going to plug a different microphone in because apparently the Blue Yeti is still having issues.
I'll just talk briefly about Bill 16 while you do that.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you. We will come back to Bill C-16, but I wanted to ask: does Canada have the same problems that America does with fundamentalist Christians trying to sneak in what they want in our education system? And
oh yes,
all right,
yeah, that happens. And they have quite a few private schools set up as well, and they're able to, in many provinces, take public funds and have them redirected to the cost of tuition or cost for sending the student to their private school. And the private school, they want to teach more and more under freedom of religion, the religious aspects, and there definitely is the desire amongst certain Christian groups here to have creationism taught as if it's on equal footing with science and evolution. And of course, I'm sure you probably agree with me that that's not the case. So there are a lot of the private schools here get aligned with a religious institution of some sort, because then they can get a better tax situation. So there definitely is a push. I think there's less nowadays trying to change the public system so much, although we do see it with at the municipal level, where a school board gets elected. And it's different than the regular municipal government elections, but there will be groups. They act just like political parties, and they want to push against programs like SOGI and whatnot, which are making sure that there's equality for people regardless of sexual orientation or identity or things like that.
SOGI?
Yeah, it's an acronym. I'll just look it up because I forget what it is. Acronym. Maybe it's a Canadian thing. It's the SOGI. It's short for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, and it is an inclusive acronym used to talk about sexual orientation, the type of sexual, romantic, and emotional attraction that one has, the capacity to feel for others, and the gender identity, internal perception of one's gender, and how they label themselves, etc. So there have been a few groups that have tried to get into run school boards that are very much against SOGI, and they don't want any kind of stuff being taught. They don't want any books that show anything that even hints at that. And when we take a look at the background of these groups, they're pretty much always linked with some kind of Christian organization, usually some evangelicals. It's very common. That's I haven't looked at all of them, so I can't speak for all of them, but I have noticed that with a number of them, that there seem to be a lot of religious people involved in them.
All right, so basically how we'd say LGBTQ sounds like. Yeah.
Actually, we use that term here more, but it's in the education field they use SOGI.
Yeah. Or GRSM.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've heard that. First time I saw that, I thought it was something to do with gun residue, CSI stuff. But yeah.
So, is it like the Texas State Board of Education level? I assume you've seen Aaron Ra's videos where he's had to fight them tooth and nail just to try to keep creation out of Texas textbooks.
We don't have that problem here. In fact, probably about 5 to 10 years ago, our local provincial government here in British Columbia has put in a mandate for our public education system to increase the amount of critical thinking skills being taught in schools. And I think they're going back to like grade 3 or 4 or something. I think they should start at kindergarten and go all the way up to grade 12. But it's a good move in the right direction because we're getting more of this. And it's usually falling on the responsibility of English teachers and language teachers and French teachers and whatnot. So which kind of makes sense because when you need to comprehend what you're reading and be able to read critically, an English class is probably a really great place to teach students how to think about what they're reading and comprehend it. And it should be taught in other classes too, so for it.
Yeah, and Canada doesn't fight being bilingual, even though there's no official language in the United States.
We're bilingual. My kids both have gone through the French immersion program in our public system, and it's been quite good. I don't speak any French myself, but other than a few words, and I speak them poorly. But there are a lot of Canadians who speak French and English, and there are also a lot of Canadians who only speak one of those languages. So it's not fully pervasive, I would say, but it is quite common. It is well supported. And if you want to get a federal government job here in Canada, if you can speak French and English, especially if you're going to be doing a job answering phones or dealing with the public in some way, that's a real asset that'll make it easier for you to get hired.
Is there any chance Canada will have anything like Kentucky's Ark Park, which I wanted to go down and protest this year now that I have a vehicle? And it's not that far from here.
Oh, you're talking about Ken Ham's project, aren't you?
If it were even just animatronic animals, it would still be a much better and much cooler attraction. But it's tough. Yeah. Yeah,
that's the arc that that's been quite controversial, and the Kentucky taxpayers paid for it even after there was some kind of fight about that not happening, I remember. So it's interesting. I've not been there. If I was in Kentucky, sure, I'd probably go and take a look, and family trip. It'd be kind of interesting to see another perspective in a way, but it's not something I'm going to go out of my way to try to go and see. There are many other things I think that would be of much greater interest to me.
Well, it's the state south of here, so.
Oh, so it's easy to get to, yeah.
It's still a long car ride, but it's a road trip.
Which state are you in?
Indiana.
Indiana, okay. Yeah.
Which
the weather's pretty hot there, isn't it?
Currently.
Yeah.
Just wait a few months, it'll change. Actually, today was a nice day. I actually got out and mowed the lawn a little bit, which I've been putting off. So, no chance for anything like the Ark Park. And
not that I'm aware of, because there are, I'd like to start an atheist science center someday. Problem is I'm not a multi-billionaire, so I couldn't make it in the way I want to make it. But it would be a rather large building that I looked into it to make it a decent size and cover everything that I want to do, and life-size models of dinosaurs and showing a whole chain of evolution and things like that. Somebody could come in and people could spend a whole day there and still not see everything. I looked into the cost of building such a structure. It'd be at least $200 million, and then the property would be significantly expensive as well, because that'd be a big facility.
Well, so, maybe sorry. Go on. I was going to say, maybe you should start a GoFundMe. It worked for those two. I'm not going to mention their names. Well, they weren't asking for that much, but
no. I think with this, with that kind of money, you definitely need to have a business plan. You need a team, a pretty solid team to do all that with as well.
Yeah, just like I thought about a year ago. It's like people were complaining about things YouTube were doing. A lot of the atheist content creators I liked were being affected, and I was just wondering, it's like, why don't you just get together, do a co-op, and start your own couple of servers and start your own video streaming service? Then I realized it's like, the logistics alone for this would be very difficult.
Yeah, and see, part of my profession is I also work in computers. I recognize a lot of equipment you have in the background there, and it brings back some memories, that's for sure. The CRT displays and the old PCs, and I have some client. I have one client who's still running Windows 3.11 to answer the phone and let people push buttons to get through automated menus to hear information, and the machine hasn't failed yet. So why replace it? You know, it's it was built in the 80s, and it has a proprietary modem. So once it fails, it's done. Yeah.
All right.
So, but nonetheless, I run internet servers as part of my business, and I've been involved in this since about the early to mid 1990s. So I've been in it for a long time.
Let me know if you need a Linux. Sorry, go ahead.
So, sorry, what were you saying?
I was just saying, let me know if you need a Linux admin.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's actually, we're running Linux servers, mostly Debian. It seems to be really well suited for the server work that we do, and there's. To run a video streaming server, the biggest problems are going to involve traffic and being able to send that data through quickly. And there are services out there that can help people get started with that fairly inexpensively. Like Cloudflare has been quite a reliable one for that sort of thing, and they've got some special streaming options that look quite good. But some of our clients have to use Cloudflare because they end up getting DDoS attacked. There's different ways to handle it, and Cloudflare just ended up being the less expensive and more effective option. So off we go with Cloudflare. It's been great. So. Yeah,
but yeah, that would take. I just got an echo. Hold on just a second.
Hopefully not from me.
I don't think it's you.
I'll mute. You can.
All right, it's whatever it was went away. So I don't know what was happening. Yeah, it was you.
Yeah, no, it's good to keep in mind for the Linux stuff. As we get bigger, we might end up needing somebody. So I'll definitely keep you in mind.
All right. Well, I'm Linux Plus certified.
Sorry?
I'm Linux Plus certified.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
Security Plus too.
What's your favorite? What are your favorite flavors of distributions?
Debian, actually.
Oh, great. You're on 10 point, was it 10.3 or 10.4 is the newest now?
Yeah, I don't know. My Minecraft server is running 9 something because the VPS provider hasn't caught up.
I'm running a Minecraft server for my kids here too. So it's yeah. Minecraft's an interesting setup. We're using the paper enhancer for it, which includes MC. I don't know if you're doing any enhancements or you're just running a plain one.
A couple enhancements. I'd like to run a Craft of the Titans server on it, but
oh wow, okay.
But I don't know if they still make that.
Minecraft is an interesting business model. Pay once and you have an account forever. It's amazing how many accounts they have. They and all the merchandise is not even considered. They're making hundreds of millions of dollars off of this. Wow, they've done very well.
So what would you do if something like the Texas school board were to actually succeed in putting creationism in the school books? We actually fought that here with the Kitzmiller versus Dover case, which took place in my home state, and the judge basically got fed up with them, which was interesting. Well,
here we don't have something in our Constitution that says we can't favor religion. But we would definitely be our schools are mandated, as far as I know, to provide a science-based education. So we would definitely object, and we would be trying to organize some kind of a protest. We'd be bringing public awareness to it as best we can. We're still a small organization, so we don't have a lot of funding, so it's very hard for us to do this yet. But the membership is gradually picking up. There are more and more people signing up and doing the annual renewals, and it's great. Because those funds help to be able to have the money to do these things. There's the mass media, of course. There's a few people in a few different places who've told me that they would love to talk with me if there was an important issue coming up. And there is one I'm going to be raising with one of them soon, because this particular person has a decent-sized audience in Alberta. The next province just to the east of us is Alberta, and they just recently passed what's called Bill 1, the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act. And what this bill does is it allows them to arrest people for peacefully protesting in the streets by misclassifying normal property and normal public space as critical infrastructure. And then this is, of course, a violation of our charter rights for a number of different reasons, which you can read up on this in the bulletin section of the Canadian Atheists.ca website. It's the newest bulletin there at this time. And so we list off the different problems there. So this is something that we're doing. So if the schools did that sort of thing here, we would definitely go after it. What I've noticed the religious institutions are doing instead is, instead of trying to push it into the public system, because we don't really see too much push in that area, they're mostly instituting their own schools and directing public funding to that school for each student. And then they're teaching creationism in that school as part of the regular curriculum. So that's how they're kind of sidestepping it and getting around it here.
All right, I just put the link to the Canadian Atheist website in chat if anyone wants to go take a look at it. Hopefully I'll remember to put it in the description later, because I always forget to do things like that.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Oma Rose Moon did bring up a point that is actually true, and it's just a bizarre feature of America just because Texas happens to be the largest textbook purchaser. Pointed out that changes that make it into Texas textbooks make it into nationwide textbooks.
Ooh.
Which is why it's important to fight that stuff.
There's a bit of a sleight of hand going on there in that case. Wow. Yeah.
Speaking of which, I brought him up before. It's like, I don't have any connection with him, but maybe you should reach out to Aaron Ra. He'd probably be happy to promote your organization.
Okay.
Or for that matter. Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. One of my friends, Neil, the 604 atheist, he and I donate blood together every 2 months. Neil knows Aaron, so I could talk to him through. Neil could probably get that going for me. So I'll consider that. Yeah, I should do that. Thank you.
Also, reach out to Apologia.
Yeah. I'm actually in contact with some of these people a little bit here and there. So yeah, that's So that's great. Yeah, these are good people. Apologies. He's got a nice style to his videos. A nice, calm kind of approach. So I like that.
I think that's one of the major differences I've seen for most Canadian skeptic YouTubers and American ones, where the Americans tend to be kind of brash. The Canadian ones are more laid back.
You seem kind of brash and laid back.
Well, Steve just kind of really irritated me. So.
Oh, yeah.
And it's one of those bizarre things, but let's not mention him.
It's okay. I've had some run-ins with him as well, so it's yeah.
Oh, speaking of which, going on to topics, there is a huge thing going on in Britain, or at least has been. I don't know if the event has been canceled due to COVID-19, where they invited Lawrence Krauss and I believe David Silverman.
Oh, are you talking about the anti-theism conference?
Yes, that one.
Ah, yes. I know David Worley, and that's a name that centers in this a little bit, because what my understanding was, like, Aaron Ra was invited, and then he dropped out when there was some problems that came up. And I agree with Aaron's decision to drop out at that point. So David Worley runs a really nice YouTube channel, and he's had me on a few times there. He's a wonderful host, and if you like, I could suggest he contact you to get you as a guest on there if you like.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, okay. I'll do that afterwards. So David was interviewing a fellow named Lance Gregorchuk, who was involved in running that organization, the Anti-Theism Conference. And during that interview, Lance started making sexual advances to David and claiming that he's going to sexually assault him at the event. That's inappropriate. And so, of course, David Worley handled it very well, and he was professional about it all, and then later decided that he doesn't want to have anything to do with that conference and because he was originally thinking to go, and he would have been delighted to be a speaker, I suspect. But so instead, he started his own, the DR conference, and there's the guy who's in charge at the anti-theism conference. His name is John Richards, and there was some weirdness about. It seemed like some hesitation. He didn't get rid of Lance right away. Later on, he indicated that Lance was sacked, and then somebody else found out that Lance is still involved. And so with all this kind of, they're not taking the issue seriously. I think a lot of people lost confidence in the organization for that. Yeah, if somebody's going to commit that kind of thing, they got to be out. That's it, And that one's a very clear case, a clear-cut case. You can actually see the evidence yourself and see that, okay, this is what they're doing. So in the meantime, John Richards did get interviewed by a few other people, including Nervardia and Shannon Q, and who are quite well known in the atheism community as well. And his performance on those two channels was rather disappointing, to put it mildly.
Why was it disappointing? And why did I forget about Shannon Q?
We don't want to forget about Shannon Q. Definitely not. On Nervardia's channel, he acted quite childish and repeated words over and over again and sounded like a little kid having a tantrum, which was disappointing because I was expecting he would act like an adult, being an adult, of course, and dealing with a serious topic, And then on Shannon Q's channel, he went on there as well, and he was near the end, I think it was, he started asking her about something, her doing some work in the kitchen or something. It really was implying some kind of misogynistic or sexist kind of attitude. So it didn't reflect well on him. And so I think because of that, a lot of people decided they don't want to go to the anti-theism conference. And of course, David Worley's got a conference going, so people have been signing up for that. And Aaron Raw, as far as I know, has moved over to that one. So it's that'll be good. Let me just look it up here. DR conference is...
Let me just thank all the people who have supported this channel. You can find my coffee link. Yeah. I don't have a link to donate to Canadian Atheist, but I did put the link in chat, and I'll put it in the description down below so people can check it out later.
Oh yeah, we have a donate option on there, or a membership option. We welcome members from all over the world, just like the other organizations do too. And we appreciate all the support that we get on that, by the way. So the anti-theism conference, my understanding with David Silverman is that he was getting an award for being Atheist of the Year. And then some people were raising questions about that because they're saying, what has he done recently? And they're reviewing some of David Silverman's history where he's been suing some prominent atheists, I think, or suing the ACA or something like that. And so people are questioning how that's helpful to the atheism community. And like David Silverman did some great work in the past, and I think he does deserve to be recognized for that. But if you're going to give him an award in 2020, it should be for some work he's done in 2019 or 2020. It shouldn't be for stuff that's been a long time ago. It needs to be a different name for that award if it's instead of Atheist of the Year, if that's the case. So.
By the way, the Streamlabs bot just came up with a message. Just ignore it because you can't use it right now because Streamlabs and OBS aren't working with YouTube nicely.
That's too bad.
Well, hopefully they'll fix it, but
looks like it's coming up twice actually, but maybe that's just StreamYard.
Well, it's going on Twitch and on YouTube.
Oh, that's fine. Okay. Yeah, the icons look slightly different. So, what was it that you were noticing about the anti-theism conference? You're mentioning there's some new controversy or something, or?
I didn't know there was new controversy. Maybe it was, or are you referring to the British one? Well, yeah. No. There are many people who have brought this up, and it's not an unnoticeable problem, but the anti-theism conference in Britain, and people like Jimmy Snow, another ex-Mormon, and goes by Dear Mr. Atheist, have commented on it, about how the online atheist community does seem to be hostile to women and sometimes LGBTQ minorities. We all know what happened last year with the Rationality Rules video and how that got way out of hand. No need to revisit that. Do you think there's some validity to that criticism? And how would you address it?
Okay, so first of all, this kind of hinges around one of the problems with public expectations about atheism communities and atheists in general. And that expectation is a misplaced one. It's one that atheists are all conforming to some kind of a standard, which is not unreasonable to expect when people are following a religion that has a printed doctrine that sets out rules and behavioral modes and things like that. When it comes to atheism, and this is where Steve and I disagree, is I see atheism as merely the absence of belief in deities as a classification, not as really anything more than that. It can be if you want it to be, but the baseline is there, and that's what it is. And so because of that, we don't have some kind of doctrine to conform to. We don't have some kind of rules or expectations. There's no minimum time required before you can say you're validly an atheist. All it requires is not believing in any deities, and that's different than saying that deities don't exist. So because of that, everything else is incidental. So an atheist could be a sexist person, unfortunately, in my opinion, but that doesn't mean they're not an atheist. Now, as far as the atheism community is concerned, which one? There are, this is a question that needs to be asked right away. Well, which community are you talking about? There's lots of them all over the world and online and whatnot. There's a number of them on Twitter. There's a number of them on Facebook. There were a number of them on Google Plus till Google shut that down, and the list goes on. So it's and then there's atheism groups all over the place that have all sorts of different ideas and different approaches, and it all depends on the people involved. Now, if somebody is acting sexist and promoting some kind of misogyny, then yeah, I'll speak up against it, because personally I think that's wrong. And here in Canada, according to our laws, it's also wrong. It's in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms that you can't discriminate against people based on sex, based on race, based on orientation, based on anything like that. And so, if people are doing that, then yeah, it should be called out. But to expect that all atheists are going to conform to that and to say, oh, you're sexist, so you can't be an atheist, now you're adding more criteria and it doesn't work. So it's a matter of principle. I would stand against it. And I think I would encourage more people to stand against it as well.
Would it just be like a certain segment of the community on YouTube who cause most of the perceived problems, or at least they don't do it anymore? This was a couple years ago, back when Gamergate was going down and Thunderfoot was going against Anita Sarkeesian and Armored Skeptic switched over from atheism to anti-feminist content. I guess what I'm trying to say, was it more just the right-wing nature of YouTube and its reactionary elements that seem to cause the problems with places like the anti-theism conference in Great Britain?
Well, the anti-theism conference in Great Britain was a well-justified pushback. Yeah. If somebody is doing this, there's a guilt by association fallacy that comes up. If you've got a famous atheist on doing things online on YouTube and whatnot, and they start veering into some unfortunate direction, like being sexist or being racist or whatever, being a bigot in some way, that's on them. And to say that the whole community is somehow responsible it doesn't work, because the community isn't like that. And I think when we see a significant number of people calling out against it, even from the atheism community especially, that just goes to show, even though we're a diverse demographic and probably one of the most diverse throughout the world as atheists, there are a lot of people who are atheists who are decent people, just like I think you would find in regular society. You'll find most people are pretty decent about these things, at least here in Canada, and I think in the US as well.
Maybe I'm not being clear.
Yeah, sorry.
What we're seeing is a divide more of, like, I hate to say right-wing versus left-wing, because these shouldn't be right-wing versus left-wing issues. But in general, more of a right-wing versus left-wing issue, rather than just these people happen to be atheists. They just had some questionable or perhaps maybe not even questionable if you agree with them, political opinions. And because they got tired of discussing atheism, because atheism is a limited topic, they just decided, I've debunked creationism, I can debunk politics just as easily, as some YouTubers have pointed out.
Okay. And yeah, again, I don't think that this is something that we can easily paint a brush on the community and say the whole community is generally like this or not. I think when it comes to something like atheism, you really have to look at the demographics of the communities you're in.
All right, well, moving on from that topic.
I'm sorry, I must be missing what it is you're trying to ask me.
No, maybe I'm just not being clear. It's just, I was trying to point out it's not their atheism that caused it, it's just more political divides that already existed, have nothing to do.
In that case, I agree. Yeah, these things are incidental to atheism. I do agree with that.
It's like a lot of people love Jordan Peterson, and I have to wonder, it's like, first of all, I spent time listening to him, and he's not stupid.
No, he's a smart guy.
But his ideas aren't that brilliant either. You just have to translate them, and you find out he's saying really common stuff.
Yeah, a lot of pop psychology from him too, I find. His 12 rules for life, I've seen them, and I think some of it's okay, but a lot of it seems unnecessary, and some of it quite strange, and probably not good rules to live by necessarily. So I've been thinking of possibly doing a video where I critique all of that. I just don't know if I want to make that a priority, though.
That's okay. I've got videos I've been meaning to do, just like I have one coming up that on how the algorithm is increasing to polarization. Or not the algorithm, but algorithms for certain social media sites. YouTube's one of them. Twitter's another. Facebook's another. Google itself is a major contributor to this. But apparently I'm not the only one who's thought this, so... And that has... Go ahead, sorry.
I think one of the things people miss a lot about these algorithms is they think that they don't realize that they're kind of learning algorithms. They're based on a lot of patterns of behavior that they detect in people, and they're trying to second guess that and apply it to other people. And so there's a lot of that going on too, which makes it really hard to pin down exactly what the algorithm's doing, I think.
I do wish I could turn that algorithm off, though.
Yeah, that would be nice.
I think that would help quite a bit too. And I know YouTube decided that one of the things it would do to help combat misinformation was to bury the result. And I don't think that's necessarily the best situation either.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. Okay.
Going back to Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Jordan Peterson. Oh, yeah.
What exactly... Sorry, I'm just confused because I've never quite understood where he is on pretty much anything, because he tries to obfuscate by sounding smart, because he does have a very good vocabulary.
He does speak well, too.
Yeah. Is he a Christian? Because I've never been clear on that.
From what I can tell, he is. He promotes the Christian God's ideals a lot. He claims all atheists are Christians, but that we just don't know it. In fact, I was just chatting with somebody on Twitter yesterday and today about this. It's like, wow. And some people respond like, oh, we need proof of the video clip. Okay, somebody else provided a video clip, and there it is. And I think David Pacman was actually picking it apart. And so it was interesting to see all that. I don't agree with him that atheists are Christians and we just don't know it. It's nonsense. It's a pretty condescending thing to say. And if I was in a conversation with Jordan Peterson about that, I would probably ask him, if I was to tell you that you're an atheist but you just don't know it, what would your reaction be? You'd probably find it condescending and rude and insulting. And yeah, he needs to, what he really needs, instead of reading Crime and Punishment, which is a great story, is he needs to read John Rawls' Theory of Justice, particularly The Veil of Ignorance, so he can kind of rethink these ideas. I think would probably be helpful to him.
Actually, I'd prefer if he'd read The Elements of Style first.
Yeah. Yeah, he can do that one first. Yeah.
Him and Steve McRae. Sorry. Speaking of positions that make just as much sense, are rocks atheist or agnostic?
I would say technically, if you go strictly by the definitions, they'd be both. I don't normally go out on that branch, though, because I don't. When I'm talking about atheism and atheists and agnostics, I'm talking about people, and perhaps cats and dogs and other animals, and maybe even the Marklar on Planet Marklar. I'm sure you get the South Park reference.
I haven't seen all the South Parks. I do love their Scientology and Mormon episodes, though.
Those were great, and the Civil War reenactment was hilarious.
Yes.
Yeah, the one about the Marklar with Starvin' Marvin, that one's a good one to see. The Marklar are brilliant. Probably my favorite alien species at this point. But yeah, because agnosticism is an epistemological matter, it's focused on knowledge or knowing, because Gnosticism, Gnostic, is about knowledge of deities or knowledge of the mystical. So agnosticism would be the absence of that knowledge. And that's how Huxley originally coined it, to get his foxtail, so to speak, of his very own. He was speaking metaphorically about that before, but he was with a group that long since defunct, but it was a group of different scholarly type people and well-educated people like himself. He was a professor. He noticed that they had terms to represent different groups. There were theists, there were atheists, there were other things in there too, and he wanted to have one for his very own, and so he came up with agnosticism, fully recognizing that the A prefix denotes absence, and he presented it to the group, and the group thanks Tony Designs, that's great. And he so he presented that, and it was accepted by his peers, and so the term stuck. And so with that, I would say he probably understood very well that A prefix applying to theism, meaning atheism, absence of belief in deity. So where agnosticism is epistemologically focused or knowledge-based, the word atheism is belief or more psychologically based. It's a belief is very different from knowledge. So they don't intertwine. And one of the things that I noticed that Steve McRae, is he tries to limit the scope by removing this baseline of absence of belief in deities and turns it into a position, as many theists do in debates, to try to shift a burden of proof onto their interlocutors. You say, I'm an atheist and you tell me I'm taking a position and I'm not, because I don't take that position, then you're the one who's trying to put a burden of proof on me that doesn't belong here, and I'm going to resist that. I'm going to tell you, no, that doesn't make sense. So what Steve does, he takes that absence of belief in deities and then he tries to move it over to agnosticism, and then he claims category errors when people are making statements about what these things mean. But he's committing the category error by moving belief over to the epistemological side of things there with agnosticism. So an agnosticism already has the absence of belief in deity. So he's ignoring linguistic structure with this. He's also ignoring other factors, not applying logic correctly on that one. He's also he's also ignoring the etymology, which is fine to ignore etymology, but I do think etymology does have a place for understanding the history of a word, as well as if you're dealing with disagreement on what a word should mean and you need to narrow it down, then that's where epistemology can play a role. But it shouldn't be the first thing. It's more like a last resort, to like a tiebreaker or something it would be more useful for.
Well, I think Steve, and he's not the only one that does this,
yeah,
it's hung up on, it's like, I don't want to be an atheist because atheist is bad. It's like, whether I'm an atheist or not, it doesn't bother me if people think I'm an atheist because, or a theist just because I'm a philosophical Taoist, and that's kind of a weird niche there, because to be a Taoist you have to accept a certain degree of mysticism.
Mm-hmm.
And whether people think I'm a theist or an atheist or not doesn't matter to me. But when it comes to like political organizing, I would probably agree more with the atheist, because first of all, the atheists aren't trying to overturn Ogberfell versus Hodges, which many of the far-right Christians in America are, or at least they
Roe
were.
and Wade. Yeah, it's
And
another
Roe
one.
versus Wade.
Yeah.
And they've just decided it's like, all right, we've lost this battle in gay rights. Let's go after transgender people now.
Yeah, it's like they're just looking for a fight or something. Yeah.
You know, someone said a long time ago, and this isn't a great philosophical point at all, but people need an enemy. Someone brought up...
Isn't that sad?
Someone brought up a few weeks ago, or rather months ago now, when there was a whole bunch of other drama going on with someone else, that
Never stops.
that these atheist commentators need like drama. It's like, well, most of them are drama channels. They're not really all that focused on.
But it's not just atheism channels that are like that. There's a lot of other channels that are just, yeah, this is how it goes. So now you've had some run-ins with Steve, have you?
Yeah. And was just suggesting it's like, leave Katie Joy Polson alone.
Oh yeah, you know, he went after, as I understand it from the reading, he's been causing problems for about a year, and then the restraining order levied against him was nationwide because it was under the Violence Against Women Act it qualified for, which is very serious, more serious than usual, and that got delivered to him about 3 or 4 days after I publicly disassociated with him, from him, I should say. Yeah, we were going to have a debate about atheism, basically, and he wanted it worded in a particular way, the epistemology of atheism. I agreed; it basically means the same thing the way I see it, and they so it's fine. But then the last point of trying to get a date settled on, I saw this video clip of him and David Silverman. And they were doing some kind of, they're stating that, well, David claimed he's stated that he's going to start sexually harassing her. And then he started naming some male genitalia on the screen 3 or 4 times. And then after that, Steve embraced it, saying that he's giving his full consent for all this. So, you know, and they're laughing about this stuff. I don't think this stuff is funny. This stuff is serious. When people commit sexual harassment or sexual assault, it has to be taken seriously. It has to be dealt with in an official, proper channel, proper kind of way. The victims are suffering from serious pressure and serious emotional trauma and whatnot when they are, and even physical trauma in the case of assault. And it can do some very serious long-term psychological damage to people as well as other things. And in case of assault, sometimes people catch diseases from it or get injured in other ways that have permanent, lasting effects. And it's very bad for society. So when that came up, I wrote to him directly in response to that video and I tagged him in on it to let him know directly that I don't want to have anything to do with him anymore, and that I've canceled the upcoming debate. And I will still review the video he did reviewing something that's on one of my websites, because I'll still take the critique seriously, but that's as far as I'll go with it. I'm not going to, because that happened before this. And I believe it's important to be fair with people and straightforward with them, which is why I wrote that to him. And then he responded very badly, followed by blocking me the next day. And David Silverman at least seemed to be interested in constructive criticism. So yeah, it's just 2 different reactions from 2 different people, right?
Well, David Silverman took it down, and it's not a defense. It really isn't. But David Silverman was clearly drunk on that stream.
Well, it's good that he took it down. That was a good decision on his part. The video clip is still out there because other people are posting that.
Oh, I have it on this channel. So.
It's a disgrace. David Silverman, I'm not entirely happy with right now as well. I have met him in person once, and I found talking with him to be quite he hadn't been drinking or anything. I don't know if he has a drinking problem or anything, and I'm just mentioning that because you mentioned he was drunk on the stream. But yeah, he seemed like quite a nice fellow, and didn't notice anything really wrong with anything he was saying at that time. I was up at UBC here in British Columbia at the local university, so I was just doing some volunteer filming for the Atheist Republic for something that they had going, and Vikram Parahu was doing the interviewing, as I recall. He's a nice fellow too. With that though, one recent thing, in addition to this bad, abhorrent behavior, I also saw somewhere in a clip he said something about atheism as a joke, and I disagree with that. Yeah,
later.
Said Legend DZ. I think that's fantastic. I recognize that there are close to 100 different known denominations of Islam. So, and here in Canada, you're free to be a Muslim and all that. I do disagree with your statement that Islam doesn't teach that. Under the Quran 439, I think it is, there's a verse, chapter 4, verse 89. It advocates for killing people who don't believe in Allah. And so I have a problem with that. Some people will defend against that, and they'll say that, oh, but that was for that time. I don't think that promoting genocide is appropriate at any time. So, but yeah, I see that they're just leaving. So, but yeah, thank you for posting that, and it's wonderful that that you hold those views. Thank you for that.
Oh, and before you go, I just wanted to say one thing, and it's been something I've had to argue with many Americans about, who just say Islam is evil because it's Islam. I'm like, and it's like, you wouldn't want to be gay over in Iran. I'm like, first of all, I'm trans, and Iran treats transgender people better
than, say, Saudi
Arabia. The government treats transgender people than the U.S. government does. Now, how they treat gay people is abhorrent.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people just want to group all these Islamic countries into one single country, and they're not.
No.
So, yeah, it's just something that bugs me when trying to discuss things with certain Americans. It's like, who think every single Islamic country is all the same. It would be about as the same as saying every U.S. state is the same, and they're not either.
Yeah, there's different people involved with different ideas.
Different governments.
Yep, which are made of people.
And
I think it was the Dawkins Foundation a few years ago revealed that Saudi Arabia put in a law that classifies all atheists as terrorists. And then some people I know from Saudi Arabia, I've not been able to confirm this, but what they've told me is that they know of some people who've been charged under that. And what happens is they get 1,000 canings, 1,000 lashes, followed by execution. So Saudi Arabia is not a very safe place to be if you're an atheist. Iran doesn't seem to have this problem, but Iran's got different issues, different people, different priorities.
Yeah, pointing out that Iran's government treats transgender people than the U.S. government doesn't mean I want to move there.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, freedom of expression? What? Not in Iran. Yeah.
It just means that they treat transgender people better from the government. Or rather, the government treats transgender people better than the U.S. government does.
And that's sad, as I think the U.S. is supposed to be modern and progressive, and the American way is advertised as a wonderful lifestyle and all this kind of thing. I remember back in the 80s that the American way was even being advertised on television commercials or on radio commercials or something. I remember hearing it when I was a kid and thinking, wow, this is really something. I wonder if it's better than life here in Canada. And then later I find out a lot of the stuff's the same. In some ways it's different. So things are different now. I'm concerned about how people are not taking the coronavirus seriously, because that's fatal on a ridiculously large scale.
Yeah, speaking of which, idiots who aren't wearing a mask, start wearing a mask at least when you go into a store. I understand it's like 80 degrees and humid, or 90 degrees and humid out. Maybe you don't want to have it out. Walking around, as long as you can stay 6 feet apart, it's not like like this is a large city. You can socially distance safely because there aren't that many people on the sidewalk. But you can't always do that in a Walmart. Put a goddamn mask on.
See, if I wear a mask for very long, I start to get a little bit of a rash here, but I still wear it anyway because I don't want to be part of the problem that I can put up with a rash. I'd rather get a rash than somebody catch something from me and end up being potentially dying from it, it's like, or even getting sick. I don't want to be part of the problem.
Biology is not a political issue. This is biology.
Yeah.
Z-Legend ZZ, I know you believe that, and that's great, but rather than attacking the Quran for saying that it needs to kill the infidels, I'm going to point out the Bible says pretty much something similar.
In 2 Corinthians somewhere, yeah. I can look up the verse, actually. And the Book of Mormon does, too.
Well, the Book of Mormon is just quoting the Bible, most likely.
Yeah, although it's got a lot of differences, too.
But most people cherry pick their religion, and the Islam that exists today is not the Islam that existed in like 1000 BC. 1080. Islam didn't exist in 1000 BC.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and then the usual defense there of having to read it in the whole context. And, I look at the paragraphs before and after, and I'm told apparently that's not enough context. So, yeah, I think people should not take my word for it and definitely go and take a look at the book and make their own determination on whether 4:89 is actually advocating for killing of people who don't believe in Allah.
But if you have a good translation you'd recommend Z-Legend DZ, feel free to put it in the chat.
Certainly.
Because, honestly, I don't read Arabic. I certainly don't read the Arabic the Quran is written in. Mm-hmm. And I have tried to read parts of the Quran, and I think one of the interesting bits I saw was they were saying it's like, when you try to guard against evil, be careful because you might actually be doing evil yourself.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and certainly there will be all kinds of good things sprinkled in these books as well. And I think these are very old books. They're written in a very old way that they're just out of date for modern society, the way I see it. Thinking from a lot of people who have different attitudes than now, I think people are more enlightened thanks to feminism and a whole bunch of other different efforts like that have resulted in a better quality of life for a lot of people. Scientific advancement, which I remember from time to time with stem cell research, was scientists were being accused of playing God, and in a way that they shouldn't be doing that. It's always something like that. It's always a struggle. It's progress versus those trying to keep things back for the sake of tradition and whatnot. So, yeah, well, it's interesting.
I look at it this way: if there is no God, if we don't play God, who will?
I like that. That is good. That's really good. And why does it have to be a male deity? Why not a goddess? Yeah, that's a question I ask. I get all kinds of different responses, and some people say, oh, well, God is also a goddess. I've had that a few times. Oh, how progressive your thinking is on that. So God is both the father and the mother then.
As far as well, in Mormon, there is a heavenly... Mormonism, the religion my parents converted to before I was born, there is a heavenly mother, but it's very, very weird, as you might expect from Mormonism.
Yeah.
Especially
sorry, Z-Legend DZ, I didn't mean to start a whole debate here. I think we could probably do that on a different stream. Please don't feel like you have to defend or anything like that. I know you mean well, and that you that the book is very important to you. I just wanted to share my opinion earlier on what I'm looking at the comments and responding to his comments there, his or her comments.
Let me put one up on the screen. So
yeah, probably the last 2 or 3. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, so Zed Legend is disagreeing with me and saying that's wrong. Allah doesn't demand killing someone. In Quran, it says that killing one innocent person is as if it's killing the whole humanity, and you have to read the whole context. I think I vaguely remember reading that as well. What's the next one? Okay, there are verses about the prophet killing, and it's because if you read the context, it says people who force you out of your houses or something. That's when defending comes in, and you can't kill women. But it's okay to kill men. Okay, so there's a bit of a sexist problem there. Or babies. It's forbidden even if it's wives from enemy sight. So, yeah, this is this kind of stuff would be a lot better, I think, if it just simply said, don't kill people. You know?
And all I was doing is saying, hey, the Bible's not any better, because it's like if you try to bring that up to someone who is raised in a Christian culture, they'd be like, yeah, but we've overcome this. We don't do this anymore. It's like the Bible still has these verses in it, whether we don't do that anymore or not. It's, yeah, most people cherry pick their religion. So,
and you know, another thing that comes up too is they'll say, oh, that's Old Testament. It's not New Testament. And so I've encountered some Christians who have different ideas than others about which parts are Old and which parts are New Testament. So there doesn't even seem to be consensus on that. But this doesn't matter because it's all in one big book, and they didn't put it into two separate books. You can go to any church and pick up a Bible, and you'll see it's all in there. The stuff that some people say is Old and some people say is New Testament. So the way I see it is they haven't removed it. There's nothing in the later chapters that says don't follow what's in the older chapters. So that's a problem.
Or even if you have something that says most of the older stuff is gone, there are people who are going to like, for whatever reason, stuff that's in the old portion of the book is the problem with Christianity.
Yeah.
And it's largely because it coincides with their own biases.
But at least in that case, a lot of the people will be able to say, look, the newer part of your book says, ignore everything from this older part onward. Why are you still pushing this? And that they'd have something to really push on and push solidly on, and that doesn't exist as far as I know.
But neither of us are Muslims, so we probably don't know as much about this as you do.
Yeah. So, oh yeah, and I'd be okay with debating Z Legend DZ at some point. I'm not sure how to pronounce their name, so I'm doing the best I can. So, but yeah, again, this is not the episode for it.
I've not seen them in chat before, so if you want to get a hold of him on Twitter, it's
they can get a hold of me. They can get a hold of me at Randolf828, RANDOLF 828. Feel free, and we can probably set something up at some point.
Or set it up on Modern Day Debate.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's a fun show. Yeah,
because they would like something like that, I think.
Oh, probably. I'd probably want to do a tag team with that. I want to team up with somebody who knows the Quran a lot better than I do.
Aaron Rosman's studying it, but
he'd be good. He'd be great. So, yeah. So that's that was interesting. So,
well,
about the atheist community, I'll see if I can find. Okay, somebody's trying to find them. All right.
Did I need to scroll down?
No problem.
Yeah, NZ Legend DZ. Be careful about a no true Scotsman fallacy. You seem to be engaging in it as well in your latest tweet or that tweet post.
So you've been you do a bunch of work in computers. How long have you been working with computers?
Well, actually, I went back. Well, actually, it started very young because my father brought home a Commodore 16.
Whoa, I got started with a Commodore 64, so you're going back a little further than me.
Well, he couldn't afford the Commodore 64 right away. And I thought it was like the neatest thing, and I fell in love with it. But a couple years ago, it's like I had the opportunity because it turned out to be the disability is permanent, but the major conditions that were causing were temporary and could be largely alleviated through physical therapy.
Okay.
So I had the opportunity to go back to college for 2 years, for free, and I said, you know what, I'd like a 4-year degree, but 2 years for free. I'm taking it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, for
I
sure.
went for Linux administration. Right now, I'm not working on them. I haven't been able to find anything other than a temp job, and I don't know if that's largely because of age. It might be, or just because right now everything's closed, and that's part of the problem.
Right now, it's hard for a lot of people to find work because there's a lot of companies that have less demand from their customers because they have fewer customers as well because a lot of people staying home with COVID-19. I think if there's a company like Amazon is doing very well, they're hiring people, but theirs is mostly, I think they're hiring a lot of people for physical work to get shipments out, and it's there's probably an increased demand for some technical support too, I would imagine, for phone support and that sort of stuff, but not as exciting as actually running servers and setting things up on computer networks for people and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So
Networking doesn't interest me.
oh, okay.
I've done Cisco iOS, and my God, is that...
Yeah, that's not typically what comes to mind when I think of networking. I'm thinking much more broad than that. To me, Cisco iOS is just one little piece of it all.
Well,
it's a common piece. It's because it's very popular equipment, and they make good quality equipment. But yeah,
setting up patch cables is not something, and doing the wiring is not something I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, there's. I know people who love doing that work, and they do it well. So, but I'll bring them when I need them.
Yeah, I have coordination issues, and it took me like 1 hour to even make my first patch cable.
Oh boy! Okay.
I did it, but it's like I was like the last one in class because everyone else made it like 15 minutes, and I'm just struggling with the wire stripper, the crimpers, and.
Yep, I've done enough of that. I don't want to do any more either. It's I get a lot more satisfaction out of writing software and running networks for people, their computer systems and online stores and things like that.
Yeah, I'm more interested in the coding, and well, the reason I chose Linux administration is because I thought, well, it was first server administration, then you had to pick Windows or Linux at Ivy Tech. And I thought, well, I really want to do programming, but I don't know if there's enough market around here for programmers, so I'll just go server administration, which should include some programming. And then about halfway through, you have to choose either Windows or Linux. And from a server administrator's perspective, Windows is a royal pain.
Yep, definitely. It's horrible.
Whereas in Linux, you just go in and change some file, and you're good to go.
You can automate pretty much everything in Linux. Yeah, you're saying Linux, I say Linux. It's all the same. So, and we don't have to get Steve McRae over it. We'll do just fine. We understand each other. Yeah, maybe it's a Canadian thing to say it this way. I find.
Sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
Is Steve McRae a prescriptivist?
I guess so. He's trying to tell people, he's prescribing how the words are used, so that would certainly be a prescriptivist thing. And I guess in a sense, many of us are, because when we talk about how to use certain words, we're prescribing how to use them. Then, yeah, we qualify. It's pretty simple to me, I think, unless he's using the philosophical definition of prescriptivist. Wink, wink.
I don't get that. And it's like, have you read... All right, an important question. Have you read Draper?
You're not making me very oppy here. No. So, yeah, Draper, he's contributed tremendously to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and as I understand it, he's the one who wrote the entry on atheism.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, and so yeah, it's interesting. These are people who've written papers, and I feel like the one in the Encyclopedia of Philosophy tries to cover all the bases in a way, and tries to appeal to the largest audience. And I feel like, in a way, a lot of the clarity gets lost in there. and they tend to ignore the term anti-theism altogether in that. And so when you don't take the anti-prefix, when you take it out of the equation, then you're left with what do you call somebody who's making the claim against theism, right?
Okay, well, without going too much into him, it is something he does, but it's something that not only he does, is focusing on just like, I want to be an agnostic, not an atheist, helpful at all if you're trying to build a political movement?
I don't think it really is helpful if you're going to use terminology in an esoteric manner, because then you end up having to spend an awful lot of time explaining to your audience what you mean. Because your audience, and the fact that he does that so much, shows that he's well aware that the general public doesn't agree with him, and so he's trying to change the world. I think he's climbing a very steep hill that you just can't get to the top. It's too steep. It's just, he's not going to make it.
He's rolling up a boulder like Sisyphus.
Yeah. Hey, great philosophy. Fantastic. That's perfect.
I just don't get it personally. It just baffles me. It's like, why choose to die on this particular hill? It matters not at all to anyone except you.
See, when he says that he's not an atheist, then he kind of disqualifies himself in a way from nosing into the atheism community and all this stuff. Kind of. When he says he's not an atheist, the immediate question comes to mind for me is, oh, okay, so is he a polytheist or a monotheist? Because it's just the way it is, right? But well, he wants philosophy to be a certain way. He claims consensus among philosophers. That consensus doesn't exist. There's one time he asked me to give him the name of one philosopher, because I told him, look, if you have consensus, all I need is to show you one philosopher who doesn't agree with that, and right off the bat, you don't have consensus now. And so he challenged me to name one philosopher. So I named Dr. Peter Boghossian, who uses atheism in this way. And then he immediately started criticizing Dr. Boghossian and talking about how horrible he is as a philosopher and blah, 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 a bunch of nonsense, ad hominem attacks, right? And then he turned around and said, well, I've disregarded that one. Give me another. And I said, no, you're just going to go and do the same on the next one and the next one. There's no point doing this. I know what your game is. I'm not playing.
And for those of you who have gotten your knowledge of truth tables from Steve McRae, first of all, I'm sorry, but that was an or condition. So, and technically it was an exclusive or condition, so only one of them can be true for the entire condition to be true. Generally,
time to review your truth tables. Don't take it from some guy on the internet who doesn't have a specialty in it.
It doesn't even require a specialty, and I still don't know why he gets them wrong.
They're pretty straightforward, you know. Yeah, it's interesting if you've got if somebody poses the question, do you believe in deities or one or more deities, whatever, and you answer yes, then you're a theist. Any other answer is a false response to that. And it doesn't automatically mean the opposite. It doesn't mean that you're taking an opposite position. To determine that, you have to ask another question.
Well, the weird thing is there actually is a sociological argument he could make if he would actually study any sociology, which is interesting from a basic level, but when I took it in college, and I'm by no means an expert, it was convoluted, and the guy who wrote the textbook just really loved Marx than I thought was more than appropriate for a college course, but unless it's political science, in which case, yeah, I can see maybe loving Marx, but
yeah, you know, one of the objections that's come up too with that, I've heard people say, well, when you tell me you're an atheist, you're not really telling me anything about you. I don't know anything about you. And so to that, my response is, oh, does that make you uncomfortable? Then ask some more questions, whatever. So, you know, maybe pick different questions to ask. It's like, if somebody's to tell you they're Christian, they're really not telling you a whole lot either, because there are how many denominations of Christianity? I hear reports anywhere from 25,000 to 45,000. And it's so you're going to have to dig deeper no matter what. The whole idea of having a conversation with somebody like we are is we find out more, because one question isn't going to tell you everything automatically. It's a rather high expectation to have, I would say.
Well, it's also basically a yes or no question. I mean, if you ever took a course on how to interview people, or even just like a basic journalism question,
sure,
if you're going to ask a yes or no question, you should ask follow-up questions to get more information.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Which is
it's funny. It's a pretty basic thing, but it's missed. Yeah. I find that usually people are doing this, trying to limit the scope, because they're saying, because what they want is they want to get their other side to take a position that they don't actually take. And an easy way to do that is to get them to accept a definition that's defective. So I see it as an attempt at manipulation.
Which it probably is, because generally when people want, are you an atheist, they want to know more. They also want to know, and the implied question, especially in this country, is why? Because most of us are raised, especially if we're raised in religion, to think that there's something wrong with not thinking there's a God.
And to be fair here, like, there are things that I did very much enjoy that Steve does. I liked that he was attacking the Catholic Church for their sexual abuse epidemic, as I call it. And he seemed to have no problem with that phrase as well. He also is pretty hard on the flat earthers, which is a good idea, because the flat earthers, I don't understand why people even go with that these days. It's so, I wouldn't say I disagree with everything Steve does, but I think I definitely disagree with the definitional part of it there. So, and I think it's important to try to be fair, and where people do deserve credit, they should definitely get that credit where they've earned it.
Well, no one's wrong about everything.
Yeah.
No one's right about everything either.
That's right. I agree.
And everyone's going to make mistakes.
And if we learn from these mistakes, we can find progress. I used to have a sign when I was doing help desk work at one company, which eventually got bought by someone else who got bought by Cisco Systems. But it wasn't Cisco at the time I worked at it, even though LinkedIn says I worked at Cisco. I worked at a company and left there before Cisco bought it. But I had a sign on the front of my desk that I got from Mad Magazine, their centerfold. It's a big yellow 4-pager deal with big black letters that said, "Everybody makes mistakes." And people would come up to my desk, because people back in the 90s still like to walk to the IT person's desk to ask for help instead of talking on the phone. About half the people noticed the mistake. The other half didn't, but everybody felt at ease when they saw that attitude. I think it's nice to encourage that kind of thing. I just thought it was pretty cool that about half the people noticed it.
The only thing I think that's cruel about IT work is there is not a small percentage of people in IT who are on the autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
To get anywhere, generally what they want you to do is start out at help desk to prove that you can deal with people.
Yeah, well, I got that job because of it. The Commodore 64 was very helpful to me in school in this respect, because unlike people, it was consistent. It would always give you the same answer no matter how many times you asked the same question. Computers are good that way. They're reliable. People, about the third time, they'll usually change their answer. Doesn't take much.
I've been guilty of that too. I mean,
yeah, it's the human factor.
However, Indiana is not in the United Kingdom.
Somebody think it's the United Kingdom?
It was Petty Officer Shipwreck.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. That's such a great name. I like how you start with petty. Everything's so well thought out with that.
It's just the naval rank. She was a petty officer.
But the pun is great.
decided that he was going to do like 2 hours of content on 6 minutes of video. And at the end of it, he accuses me of getting his video taken down in the UK. It's like, first of all,
Wow.
I didn't even know I knew anything about IT at the time. And secondly, it's like, as I pointed out to him before he blocked me, it's like, there are plenty of people in the UK who you've pissed off that don't like you. Why don't you think one of them did it?
One of the things I was actually looking forward to in the debate with him was I had told him privately in the chat beforehand, because we talked. He approached me. He said he wants to educate me. So I said, okay, let's do it as a debate, and off to go as a debate it was. But so he approached me first on it. But it was, I said to him, look, at one point during your video, if you put on that Pope hat, I'll put on a cowboy hat. And he thought that would be great. And, we had some good ideas coming up before, and I thought everything was good. It's a shame that it didn't turn out.
Well, getting off that topic, because I do remember you saying something about the Catholic Church, and they do really do have a problem with the way they deal with priests, but they're not the only religion that has a problem.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, there was, I remember a newspaper article a few years ago about a Buddhist temple that had that problem. And then you can also go back in history to, this is not a new problem either, like look at Mahatma Gandhi, who's often given a lot of respect and admiration. But there's a point where he slept naked with his niece or somebody much younger than him, a child, to prove that he could be celibate. Which I think is ridiculous. I think the easiest way to prove you can remain celibate is just by not sleeping with women or anybody at all. But I think it was an excuse. I think he was a child predator, because otherwise, why do that in the first place? It's such a stupid thing.
Not to denigrate what he did in getting India free from British rule, but there were a lot of weird things about Gandhi.
Yeah, and it seems to be that some of these people who've done some tremendously good things over the years throughout history have had some weirdnesses about them too. That's also not a unique trait.
But I also know, being an ex-Mormon, one of the things the Mormons expect you to do as a teenager is go talk to your bishop without any other adults present about things the bishop has no business grilling you about.
Oh.
Fortunately, most Mormon kids lie about it, but it's like,
you
didn't
have
to debate? No. Well, I didn't go to for some reason, I didn't do those interviews except when I needed to move up, or I never really wanted.
They ask questions about sexual orientation and stuff like that, don't they?
They ask about specific. Well, I don't get monetized anyway. They ask about masturbation habits.
Oh.
They ask if you're sexually active, and it's none of the bishop's business.
No, that's all private stuff. Well, that would be creepy if you're in a room alone with that guy and he's asking you these kind of questions. That'd be scary as a kid to go through that.
Also leads to abuse, which is a problem.
Not a big surprise there. Well, they say the Mormon Church has hundreds of billions of dollars stockpiled away, apparently.
Yeah, that did not surprise me at all.
Yeah.
And
it seems like they're able to take on the Catholic Church with that amount of wealth.
No, they were just keeping it.
Like they lose track of it, or?
No, they were trying to invest it, and they wanted more money.
One of the problems with hoarding all the money, though, is then there's less money in circulation.
Then, well, that's one of the problems with wealth inequality that most people don't seem to, or rather, the people who say it's like we need to do something about it realize, and other people say it's their money, why can't they keep it? It's like, well, the whole point of money is that it's supposed to be spent.
It's a shared resource.
Because it's just a medium of exchange so we can buy goods and services. Rather than the barter system, and there was an excellent cartoon series, which I think you can find on YouTube now, called The Island of Mocha and Return to Mocha, which explains the basic economic principles behind why money is a good thing and how the barter system didn't work.
Well, the barter system doesn't scale very well in larger populations, and they need something to replace that. Star Trek seems to show an interesting system, more like a meritocracy without the need for money unless you get Ferengi involved.
I never understood how the economy works in Star Trek.
There isn't one. So I remember some of the episodes in The Next Generation. They made reference to how they got rid of money a long time ago.
But in Star Trek Force, or one of the Star Trek movies, Scotty buys a boat. With what?
Yeah, so Gene Roddenberry wasn't alive anymore at that point, was he? When they made that.
I think it was the first Star Trek where he said, "I bought a boat," and they made out of retirement.
Okay, all right. So somebody made a mistake there. It's hard when you're making these things to keep track of all the facts, and fans like us start to notice these little inconsistencies. It's a nightmare for them.
Well, my headcanon is, since everything's made through the replicator and you don't really need to buy things with normal currency, what they use are replicator credits. That's what they did in Voyager.
Well, but it's a finite supply there though too. They're not close to home base where they can easily replace the supplies that they need for the replicators.
Maybe they'll explain more in Picard, since they seem to be going a bit out of the Federation and they're like corporations. And
that's turned out to be a beautifully produced series. Wow. Yeah. Hey, I'm wondering, from your perspective, what do you think? Where do you think that atheism should be could do better at? Like people in the atheism community in general, are there certain areas that you think that are being neglected, or some things that should be done a little bit differently? Or
well, I think for the most part, I think the YouTube atheists I watch are just like more or less trying to get people to coalesce together because they see not necessarily there's a need for atheists to be a political movement as atheist, but there's a need for people who hold similar values to push back, especially in this country, against the religious right. Because most of us don't want a Christian theocracy.
Yeah. Fire and brimstone. It's not a way to live.
Not even Donald Trump. And I think what they're doing mostly is building bridges. Now, there have been some problems that have just been, people hold different political ideas, and we have a weird problem right now with canceling people, and I hate to use that term, but
cancel culture. Yeah, I've heard about it. Yeah.
Let's go back to Rationality Rules and what he did a year ago. And I was pissed off when he released that video.
But he took steps to get things right, didn't he?
Yes, I don't think. And he is trying to make up for it, I think, from what I've seen. I don't think he's quite done it yet, but just
do you think that if somebody's trying to get stuff right, that they should be rewarded with a certain amount of credit for that?
I think we should not just keep people on the blacklist forever if they're trying to take steps towards redemption. This is, for example, why I don't think David Silverman is anywhere near where he needs to be yet. Because he hasn't shown any signs of remorse for what he did. Or at least I haven't seen any. He might have, because I don't really pay that much attention to him. And I do remember him sitting across Bill O'Reilly with his mouth just dropped open after.
Yeah, he explained that. He explained that backstage, Bill O'Reilly was an intelligent guy to talk with, but now he's not. He, like, as soon as the cameras went on, he realized that Bill's an actor. Let's see if we can get a picture of this cat in my yard here.
Cool.
Let's see. Where's that cat? Where are you, cat? Oh, cat just ran away. Sorry. But not my cat, one of the neighbor's cats. But I thought, what video's complete without a cat, right?
He's just sitting there with his mouth open for like a minute because he can't process the stupidity of the statement.
Caught him by surprise. Caught him right off guard, which is probably what Bill O'Reilly really wants, too, because it's good for his ratings. A meme was made out of him. It was great.
Then he does the proper thing. He regains composure and just spends the rest of this interview making fun of Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah, that was good. So that went well, and he does deserve respect for all that.
It's just like listening to some things Chesh says, and you're just like, what?
Yeah.
Anything more you could do? But I think for the most part, we have to realize that, first of all, YouTube tends to be a notoriously right-wing platform, and we can't expect everyone to have perfect ideas and ideals. A good example of this is, do you know who ContraPoints is?
I've heard the name before, but I'm not familiar with them.
She's another trans YouTuber who had a master's degree in, or I don't know if she has a master's degree. She was going for a master's degree in philosophy, and then decided, you know what? I have almost zero chance of getting a job with this.
Oh.
So I'm going to do burlesque on YouTube and comment on the atheists who I think are going a little bit overboard on right-wing talking points.
Okay.
But she came under fire a few months ago for having Buck Angel on, because Buck Angel has said some bad things about non-binary people.
Oh.
And I think it's more of a matter of it's a screw-up I made too, where she didn't look into someone's background. Hi, Anti-Ordinary, if you're watching, by the way. Can't wait for your video on the... That's what you're waiting for, but for the most part, I just didn't vet you. I happen to think maybe some of the people telling me things they told me about you were going a little bit overboard and being hyperbolic.
Huh.
But you do kind of need to change your views on non-binary people. But ContraPoints was basically just harassed, and some of her online YouTube friends were harassed too, just for supporting her because they refused to announce her. And she took about a month off. Of course, her videos take a long time to produce because she does almost professional quality videos.
Wow, okay.
And came back with a 2-hour-long video on cancel culture. And I think she just made a mistake. I don't think the response was proportionate to what she did, but we have this idea that the people we admire on YouTube are going to line up to our ideals perfectly, and that's not always the case. There are plenty of people who are going to disagree with me and my statements. Callum has disagreed with me plenty of times on Trump if he's still in chat.
I guess, I forgot what I was going to say now.
I was rambling. So.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's good. Yeah, I think when people try to make some kind of group of demographic of people a problem, that's going to be a problem because they're not going to. Someone's always going to find counter examples. It's never going to work out. You can't say a whole demographic is all bad or all good or something. I wouldn't dare say that all the Catholic clergy are bad. There's a lot who are, but there's probably a lot who are good as well. And I'll include in that group the Catholic priest in South Park, because they did an episode with him one time. He went to the Catholic Church to raise this issue about child molestation, and it fell on deaf ears because he's not into it, and it turned out he was the only one who's not into it. So give it to South Park to really find the atypical and exploit it, right? So ContraPoint, I guess, has a large audience.
Yeah, she's the second most popular political YouTuber on.
Oh, okay. So no wonder there was an extreme response. All right, that's
second most popular trans YouTuber because Blair White still.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, most of her streams are just basically pop philosophy. So
okay.
Yeah, well, Steve
I'll
McRae's
have to take a look at that.
If you're going to ask me who my favorite philosopher is, I'll probably give you her name or the guy who does Philosophy Tube's name.
Oh, so you've got a favorite philosopher, you say?
That's probably who I would. I don't really have a favorite modern philosopher because I think when you get into academic philosophy, I think you're kind of losing the point of what philosophy is supposed to be about.
Okay. I think philosophy is one of the important factors in philosophy is that you have dissenting voices. You have people with different ideas. You don't have consensus. Otherwise, it doesn't work as well. It becomes more of an ideology or something, or a doctrine or something.
I think it's supposed to be more of a guide to how people live their lives and just to look into how society operates. And if you're going to go in, it's like, oh, this is how this definition is used, and it's the only one that's acceptable. I think you're kind of going off track. It's like maybe
it's not philosophy.
Maybe instead of reading philosophy papers and trying to nitpick over the minutiae of a single word, you should probably take a look at the broader picture. Or basically, it's in several Tao Te Ching translations, it's referred to as abiding in the kernel, not the husk. Basically, you're forgetting the spirit of what it's supposed to be about if you're going to argue over minutiae.
Yeah. Yeah, and you'll see in these academic papers, it's not uncommon for a number of different words and terms and phrases to be clarified at the beginning or defined or whatever. That doesn't mean that there's any consensus. In fact, usually it indicates that there is confusion about the term, so here's how they're using it in this paper. Or perceived confusion. So, well.
Well, we're only going to go for about 17 minutes because we've almost gone for 2 hours, and
sure.
There are video games I want to play.
Oh yeah. My kids are into Zelda on the Nintendo Switch, and I've played a little bit. It's a fun game. That's pretty in depth.
I've been playing a video game called Atlas.
Atlas.
It's a crafting game where you're basically building ships and being a pirate.
Oh wow. Okay.
Unfortunately, my sloop got sank by a ship of the dam last night, so I have to build a new one.
Oh boy. And so you have to raise money in the game to get the supplies and everything you need for that, I guess.
You just need to gather the supplies. It's a crafting game.
Okay.
But it's still... They need to reduce the amount of time it takes, but if you ever played Ark, it's the same problem.
Okay.
Because it's the same company.
Oh, well, they have the same people doing it then. Hey, it was successful once, let's do it again.
All right. Actually, if anyone has any questions, we don't have that many viewing right now, but if you have questions for me in chat, just feel free to ask me that, or questions for Randolph.
Yeah.
And while I think of some questions here, I wanted to ask my roommate questions, but she's busy watching Linus's tech tips, I think. Or she might be watching Japan Sinks 2020. Which is a weird anime if anyone's looking for anime recommendations.
Have you seen? I guess a lot of people are familiar with Archer, but have you seen Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law?
I saw a couple of episodes of that when it was on Cartoon Network.
Yeah, it was Adult Swim is I think where it came from. Yeah, that's what Stephen Colbert does the voice for the boss, Phil Ken 7. That is so brilliantly put together. The comedy flies past so quickly. You get kind of watch the same episode a few times before you pick up on everything. It's one of those really good quality ones. The Venture Brothers is another nice one.
The Venture Brothers is just Johnny. It's Johnny Quest as an adult as a failure.
Sure, yeah, that works.
That's how they describe it, and they even have Johnny Quest come on an episode as like an alcoholic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny they're making fun of all these old shows. Yeah, some of them get really brutal and horrible, but the Venture Brothers kept it together quite well. Yeah.
Well, generally, Adult Swim isn't what I would say the most woke, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Network on the planet, but it doesn't mean I don't have content that they don't have content I enjoy. Like Squidbillies, I love the theme song too.
With the Adult Swim network, I've encountered quite a few people who are surprised that South Park was not on it. South Park would be a good fit.
Because Adult
South
Swim
Park was around before.
For it.
Yeah.
And I don't think Comedy Central's letting that cash cow go anytime soon.
Oh no, that one does very well. Have you seen the new Star Trek series called The Orville? I know it's not Star Trek.
It's a best. Seth MacFarlane actually wanted to do a Star Trek series, and he wanted to do it seriously.
Yeah, I remember him saying. Yeah.
But Paramount, after he did Family Guy, wouldn't let him anywhere near Star Trek. And I think Orville's both kind of a
hybrid.
A homage to the fact that he loves Star Trek, and secondly, a kind of screw you. It's like, fine, I'm going to do Star Trek the way you were afraid I was going to do it. Here it is.
It's actually quite a good show. I feel like they rushed through the philosophical considerations of their decisions a bit too quickly. But other than that, I think it's a great show. I really, really like it. My kids love it, and our whole family, we watch it. So we're looking forward to the next season whenever it starts getting ready, hopefully this November.
Spooky Bed Hair is asking me about getting a new place to live. What I have is a trailer. A couple of things need fixed, but as soon as I can get those fixed and find, well, actually I need a place to put it as well, I will be using that instead of just this, well, a lot of people thought this was an Air Force tech closet, and it's just my roommate's junk.
Oh, it's your roommate's stuff. Okay.
She has a master's in computer science too, but there's like a bunch of old computers, like right to my right here, there's a bunch of compacts from like the 90s. And actually, you'll see parts of it because I have a brief video I wanted to put up just so people could see what it is, because people in this community love to know where their money went, and they want to know that it got spent properly. So
is it one of those old compact luggables?
Oh no, I actually had an IBM portable. So You'll see the interior of that trailer.
Okay.
Yeah, my portable was an IBM though.
Now, we were chatting a little bit about computer programming recently, and a contentious issue of the goto command came up.
Oh yeah.
That's contentious through the whole industry.
Yes.
I have a background in machine language programming, so I tend to have a like for the jump statement, which is the higher level languages goto, but because it's kind of necessary. But in the higher level languages, you don't really need it so much. I do agree. But which languages are you working in?
Actually, I really love Python.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about it.
And I want to actually learn its Pygame because plug, I actually do have an independent game out there called Petty Theft Moped. You'll find the link for that down below. That actually is there because I copy that every time.
To take a look at that. Okay, sounds great.
It has some problems, mostly because there was a near-fascist working on it with me, and the game actually has a status quo warrior dungeon and a social justice warrior dungeon, but you can only do one of each. It's basically just my sense of humor as a video game.
All right. I'll take a look at it.
There are some things in the game you're not going to understand because, you go to first of all, there's a local ghost story about a dog named Stiffy Green who apparently haunts his master's tomb. But outside, you'll find it, one of the tombs says Norman Loudermilk silence, and if you don't know who Norman Loudermilk is, you're not gonna...
Nope. Okay.
You're not gonna get that joke.
So you do Python, I guess you do C as well, and some others.
Well, I haven't done Pascal in a while, and...
I remember Pascal. Did that in school. Yeah. It's a nice looking language, but not for me.
Yeah, I had a teacher who really loved it.
Yeah.
But the go-to command, a lot of people don't like it because they fear it will cause spaghetti code, which is not an invalid accusation as far as assembly language goes. From what I remember, a lot of the jump commands are the only commands you have to go out of a current logic block, so that's necessary.
Yeah.
Whereas in higher level languages, or technically C is now a low level language, which baffles me, but they will deliberately declare the go-to as a keyword and then refuse to implement it.
Yeah. They don't want any third party coming in and adding a go-to plugin, so I think they block it ahead of time.
In C++, they actually have an official go-to, but I think on the new compiler you mentioned, which is a descendant of a Unix C compiler.
Yeah.
Or, well, not a descendant, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's based on Unix C compilers.
I'm new to C++, but I'm finding with the Qt5 libraries, that makes it quite easy to transition away from Java because they have a lot of their user interface stuff based on Java, Swing, JFC, and Java FX. Yeah. Graphical user interface libraries, so they got the layout manager concepts and all that there. So it's a very, very shallow learning curve going from Java to Qt5 on C++. There are certain weirdnesses about it that are a little different than C. I'm not an expert in both of those languages, but I can get by in them, so I'm getting up to speed on them. I'm really liking the language. I do a lot of Java. I do a lot of Perl, especially mod Perl and Apache, and I don't do PHP. I don't do Python, but I'll probably learn Python at some point. And before that, machine language and obviously BASIC. You know, as we start out with BASIC on the Commodore, that's how it goes.
Well, with your operating system, you had to know it.
Yeah.
Because they didn't come out with GeoWorks until later, and GeoWorks was, basically Windows 3.1 on the Commodore 64.
Yeah, it was, wow. You know, by the time you load GeoWorks, you could load one more application. But a lot of people had the memory expansions, so they could get multiple things going. It's amazing. It's not a multitasking machine, but it sure kind of looked like it was with GeOS there.
But back in the early days of Unix, the people who did C did not include a goto.
Oh, okay.
Unix people being what they were said, this is stupid.
Okay.
We're going to kludge it back in.
Yeah.
So you can kludge a goto into C, but it's not officially supported by the language, I think.
Okay, well, that makes sense. That makes sense, yeah. I know some people who are vehemently against it. They'll get mad about it.
It's like one of the fastest ways to get something done with IT people is to
Yeah.
tell them they can't do something. They will prove you wrong.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I made NetWare loadable modules for the Novell NetWare operating system. That was fun too. People told me that I would have to do it in C, and I figured out how to do it with machine language assembler, and no C code at all, except for using C calling conventions. It was fine.
Why couldn't you do it in assembler? It's the machine language.
That's right, but that's what these guys told me, so I went and proved them wrong by figuring out how to do it. And then I made some applications for NetWare that worked, and I made some money from. It was pretty good.
I mean, you probably wouldn't do anything major in assembly today because assembly was typically used for the longest time when it was speed critical, and now the C compilers are A, faster, and B, the computers are much faster than they were, so you don't...
They're quite good. They, the advantage that the human still has with doing it manually is that we can see the big picture that the C compiler can't, but the C compiler does more than sufficient, I think. So I'll agree with you there.
Not that assembly still isn't used, because sometimes C still isn't fast enough, and sometimes you just don't have one available.
And there's driver programmers who still have to get into that a little bit. So it'll always be there. Anybody making an operating system has to know this stuff.
Yeah. I'm sure if you ever patch the Linux kernel, you'll be doing it.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into that. I think I need to be a lot better at C and C++ before I can get to that. The machine language part I'll have no trouble with.
I'd have to know a lot more about systems level programming. Because what a systems administrator does isn't it's not what would be referred to as systems level programming. It's mostly scripting, programming basic tasks just so they can be done relatively quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Or running a script and that it as a cron job on Linux.
Yeah, the cron setup is very useful.
Speaking of
before Linux, I was doing lots of stuff with NetBSD. Before that, I did Novell NetWare. I used NetWare to host over 500 internet websites. And it worked great, thanks to Apache on there. But they stopped updating Apache So I ended up moving to Unix NetBSD to get what I needed. So it's a shame. NetWare was very well suited because it's a high-performance file server due to their amazing, brilliant caching algorithms. But Novell's doing SUSE Linux now, which I never got into.
I think it's just a variant of Debian, to be honest.
A lot of them are, like Ubuntu. There's another variant of Debian. Yeah. Debian.
All right. It is almost 9 o'clock. I said we'd only go for until 13 more minutes or however long it was. So do you have anything coming up or anything you'd like to promote?
Oh, well, I am promoting, of course, the Canadian Atheists at www.canadianatheists.ca. Thanks a lot for putting the link on there earlier. I appreciate it. And thank you very much for having me on this program. What I have coming up is I'm trying to get in touch with the Governor General, Lieutenant Governor General of Alberta, to ask them to consider repealing Bill 1, the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act, because it conflicts with our charter rights and also violates the charter rights of the Lieutenant Governor General because it gives them additional powers and makes them unequal under the law. And where our charter says that everybody must be equal under the law. So even though it's a benefit, it's still an inequality. So it's going to be an interesting turn of events. I will probably have to move up to the federal level if I can't get the response that I need. But I'm giving them enough time to respond because I want to use a reasonable approach with it. To tend to be more successful that way with reasonable approaches, I think. So that's a bit of a project that's coming up right now.
Also, if I'm wrong and Trump gets a second term, what's the best way to sneak into Canada?
Well, at the Canadian Atheist website, if you click on resources under government, we have some information about immigration there. The very first best step would be to take a look at what our immigration policies are, because if it looks like you can get in quickly with some of those policies, go for it. You'd be welcome here. Oh, well. And I would encourage coming to the Pride Parade in Vancouver because it's a phenomenal event where usually more than 200,000 people, as far as I know, attend in the streets. And the parade goes on for most of the day, followed by partying past midnight. It's just an incredible event. We bring our family there, our kids. It's great. It's originally it was the Gay Pride Parade, but it's just been changed to the Pride Parade many years ago, I guess to be more inclusive, and it's wonderful. And you see everything, everybody. That
was a joke. I know Trump's been a very bad president, and I have been worried that he might go a little bit farther than he has, and he's gotten farther than I think he has, especially along our southern border. But do not sneak into Canada.
No, follow official channels. You'll have much better success that way. Now, I heard recently Trump's talking about not running again for re-election, but I don't see the Republican Party propping up an alternative to him for the next running as president position. So I'm thinking that's just a lie.
All right, that may be. All right, as I would like to end this stream soon.
Oh, sorry. I don't mean to drag on. I just wondered if you heard about that. So
well, I'm going to be just as bad, so that's why I'm trying to remind myself to end it.
Thank you very much for having me on. I do appreciate it. I really do. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
If you want to tune in for drama, this Sunday, Cheshire Vic, the spiteful little goblin, has a new stream up I want to cover. That'll be Sunday at 2 p.m. Monday, of course, is McRae Mondays, and actually most Thursdays, I would like to start something where I'm just debunking truthers who have a very bizarre understanding of technology. That is why I go after young Pharaoh, by the way, if you ever saw those streams. But that guy is hilarious, and I think he knows most of what he's saying isn't true. With that being said, be excellent to each other, and so long, and thanks for all the fish.